It's the silence followed by the noise. It's the welcoming brew around the table.
And the pounding adrenaline of your first call out.
From a plume of water bursting from the ground
to being soaked in sweat from the heat.
It's successfully planning an event at short notice and the pride of pulling on a shirt for the first time.
Today, it's the panic on people's faces.
Tomorrow, it's the support from the communities we serve.
It's feeling anxious about starting a new role, only to be supported and inspired by amazing colleagues.
It's comforting families who've lost loved ones.
And heartfelt thanks from those we have saved.
It's the gravity of shutting down an unsafe business to turning around the lives of vulnerable people.
It's the driving grotto that makes Christmas that little bit brighter.
And the humour that gets you through stressful times.
From training that pushes you to your limits.
Making positive changes and challenging the status quo.
It's feeling excited, included and exhilarated.
Yet having the space to feel vulnerable and exhausted too.
It's the memories that stick with you for life, the good ones and the bad.
It's a great feeling, serving your community.
It's great to be part of something bigger than yourself.
And it's great that no day is the same.
It's all of these things that make us who we are.
It's all these things that make us Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service.
This is me.
This is us.
And this is our story.
The 25th of July. Can we have apologies for absence, please?
We have apologies from Councillor John Clark for personal reasons and from PCC Gary Roddy.
Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest to declare? No, that's anything. Can we move to the minutes of the 23rd of May for confirmation?
Chair, can I just highlight an error in the minutes, please, for the meeting on the 23rd. The dates of Finance and the Resources Committee are incorrectly stated. but the minutes will be reprinted and reissued with the correct dates on.
Subject to that, we all happy with those minutes? And if we could actually confirm the minutes for the 23rd of February, for those who are in attendance, 2025. Thank you. So if we move on to Chair's announcements, the funeral of Martin Sadler will take place on the 31st of July, following the tragic incident at Bicester in May, where Martin and 2 colleagues sadly lost their lives. The Chief Fire Officer and Service Standard Bearer will be in attendance to represent the service. Our condolences remain with the family, with Martin's family and friends and colleagues, and I'm sure the Fire Authority will join me in paying our continued respects for all those affected by the incident. I think at this point, Councillor Lee, you wanted to make a statement?
Thank you. After the elections, we have lost lots of good councillors that served this authority very well. I just wanted to say a big thank you to all of them, no matter of the political persuasion of the councillors. Anybody that has served on this fire authority has always done so respectfully and done a good job. So all them councillors that are no longer here, I'd just like to thank them for the service.
Yeah. Thank you. I think it's also to make note of Mrs. Fielding, Councillor Fielding, for her hard work. She's been on the fire authority for a long time too, so thank you for that. If you want to move to item 5, committee changes.
Thank you, Chair. I've received confirmation from Councillor Battlemarch of his resignation as HR Committee Chair, but he will remain as a member of the committee, so we'll need to appoint a new Chair of HR Committee.
Okay, do we have any nominations for Chair of HR Committee?
Yeah, I'd like to nominate Councillor Nick Rain, who was the Chair of the HR Committee for the previous couple of years and is still a serving member of the committee. It seems straightforward for him to retake that position, if that's okay with everything. Thank you.
Is that seconded?
I'll second that.
Any other nominations? Thank you. Congratulations, Councillor Brain. You are now the Chair of the HR Committee.
Thank you.
We now want to move on to item 6, Annual Governance Statement for 2025. Over to Bev.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So the annual governance statement is a statutory document which explains the processes and procedures we have in place to enable the service to carry out its functions effectively in relation to compliance with legal and ethical standards and safeguarding public funds. So we've adopted the Local Code of Corporate Governance in February 2017, and that's based on the SIPFA and SOLIS guidance of good governance in local government. And within that Local Code of Governance, it sets out a number of principles that we comply with, and then that's what the annual governance statement assesses against those principles. So the principles are actually in the main document of the AGS, which is Appendix A. So their principles are set out in 1.3 on page 27, and that's what we're assessing against. So the annual governance statement goes through and has a number of sections. So it has the scope of responsibility, which is setting out the fire authority's responsibilities in relation to those legal and ethical standards and safeguarding public funds. It has the purpose of the governance statement, which is section 2 of the actual statement, which comprises of the systems and processes and cultures and values that we have in place that enable the authority to monitor its strategic objectives. We have the governance framework, which goes through and identifies the key elements and systems that are in place. So that looks at the authority's vision, the internal control environment, the decision-making processes, the structures that are in place, the policies and procedures and regulations, the internal audit function, risk management policy, business continuity plans and best value and efficiency requirements, and the financial management code. We've then got section 4 of the annual governance statement, which is the review of effectiveness, which again looks at the authority and its committees, the management review, performance management, risk management, business continuity, the professional staff that we have in place, financial planning and budgetary and monitoring efficiencies, the financial management code, the roles of the internal audit and external audit, the role of the HMIC FRS inspections, other external audits that we've had in place, where we are with the national fire standards, and where we are with the reviews that HMIC have issued as well. It then goes on to identify in section 5 the significant issues that are affecting in terms of what will impact in governance for 25-26 of the year ahead. So again, that looks at has identified that there could be implications of the governance arrangements for fire authority, which is linked obviously to the MCA and the devolution programme and LGR. It looks at where we are with the 25-26 budget, where we are then with that medium-term financial strategy going forward. Highlights that the pension remedy is one of the areas where we've got potential risks in relation to implementing that. Again, talks about internal and external audit and the HMIC inspection regime. And then the final part of the AGS gives the conclusion. So the conclusion sets out that we have concluded that we've got well-developed and evolving governance arrangements in place that are fit for purpose. And then the report goes on to highlight the reasons why we've concluded that. So that's in relation to the fact that we have got the local code of governance in place, and we've adopted the SIT for Financial Management Code. It highlights where we are, the 23-24 statements of accounts, in which we did get a disclaimed opinion, but that's due to the audit backlog, so it's not unique to us. It is a national issue, and prior to that we've always had sound results in terms of the statements of accounts audits. It talks about the external audit commentary on securing value for money, in the fact that we've got no significant weaknesses in identified, we've got proper arrangements in place for our financial sustainability, governance, and improving economy efficiency and effectiveness. It also talks about the internal audit charter that's been adopted, and the fact that we have an internal audit plan that comes through to SLT and then Finance and Resources for approval, and that we, Finance and Resources, then review and monitor implementation of recommendations from their reviews. It also talks about the HCMI inspection that we took place during the year, in which we received a rating of good against 10 assessment areas and adequate for one area, and it mentions and goes through the other external reviews that we've taken place, where we'd received reasonable and substantial assurance. The final point in the report is at 2.15, and that identifies that we've introduced an action plan, which is attached as Appendix B to the report at page 49 of the agenda pack, and that just identifies some areas where we're going to be implementing actions going forward in 25-26 for that continuous improvement in terms of our governance. So I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Thank you. Councillor Vernon.
Just a short one. 10.2 delegates authority to the chair of the authority and the chief fire officer to update the annual governance statement for any retrospective factors. Is that then reported back, if there are any alterations?
Yes. I think for me as chair, I think I welcome the thorough review of the governance framework. I mean, although this is an annual statement, it's actually a very good statement because it provides reassurance on how robust our systems are and that they're fit for purpose, and also, you know, identifies areas of improvement. So I've got two specific questions for you, Bev. Is what improvements have been made for the insurance mapping, and how are we strengthening the governance in light of the financial uncertainty? Just those two specific questions.
So in terms of the assurance mapping, so by introducing the improvement plan, that will give us something to monitor against going forward when we do the effectiveness of the annual governance next year. We'll have that as a basis to report back on in terms of implementing those actions. So that's the purpose really of the action plan, to inform that. And in terms of the financial position going forward, obviously a key part of that is the efficiency strategy that we've implemented as part of the MTFS. and again about monitoring against that going forward. So there'll be a report coming through to next Fire Authority in terms of an update on that efficiency strategy.
Thank you. Any other questions? So in terms of recommendations, are we happy to...
Councillor.
Sorry, Councillor Rowe.
No problem. Given that...
It's because you got rid of the beard, I don't recognise you anymore.
So that's it was all right. I knew it was with a drawback. Given that data protection, when it was audited this last year, was only given a reasonable level of assurance, what more is being done to improve that, given the potential for fines if we're found to be not compliant with GDPR?
So obviously there were recommendations made as a result of that audit, and we're implementing those recommendations, and that's fed back to Finance and Resources Committee. So by implementing those recommendations, that obviously increases then that level of assurance. It was what the weaknesses that were found in relation to where they've made the recommendations, and they need to be actioned.
Yeah, I suppose if I can, Councillor, as well, is that in the documents you'll see, like CRMP, you'll see a number of internal governance things in the framework. In there's like the security steering group, so part of that is property, people and information. So we have a specific group led by one of the Assistant Chief Fire Officers that considers things like strategic defence review and those things, so cyber and your investment as an authority in cyber. So there is a kind of a plan in the way forward within the CRMP. So there's some high level stuff, things in there, and then there's some low level things. So I suppose that group's job is to keep an eye on those sorts of things that you're raising. So, buying particular computers, staff training, so things like staff training, and we've just done a phishing exercise in the organisation, and we've literally just issued some information around data breach and how people can do it, good practice behaviour as well, so keeping that very live.
Okay, no other questions? I'll make sure I don't miss anyone. So with that, are members happy to approve the draft governance statement for 24-25, presented at Appendix A to the report, and delegate authority to the Chair and the Chief Fire Officer to update the annual governance statement and actually bring back any respective changes to the Fire Authority Board? Great. Thank you. So if we want to move to item 7, which is the lovely Treasury Management Annual Report for 24-25. Is that you again, Beth?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So this report reports on the Treasury management activities that have been undertaken during 24-25. And that's against the fact that the Fire Authority approved a strategy in February 2024 for 24-25. So the annual report has been prepared in compliance with CIPFA Code of Practice, and it covers the economic review of 24-25, a review of capital activity for 24-25, a review of the borrowing and capital financing requirement, a review of investment and cash management, a summary of the investment and cash activity, and a review of the year-end investments, cash and usable reserves, and then a summary of compliance with the Treasury and prudential indicators. So I'll just draw you to some of the main points in the report. So at 2.6 in Table 2, that identifies the capital expenditure for the year for 24-25, and it also shows 23-24 there as a comparative. So in total we spent 4.6 million in terms of capital expenditure, and 585 of that was funded by capital grants, capital receipts and revenue contributions, so it was funded in year directly. And that meant that just over £4 million was funded by borrowing. So that at that point it's unfinanced, it's funded through borrowing. In relation to the capital spend as compared to the budget of the 5.3, if you wanted more information in relation to where those variances are, that was presented to Finance and Resources Committee on the 20th of June, and the report goes through where those variances are. In relation to Table 3 of the report, which is on page 55 of the agenda pack, that shows that our capital financing requirement for the year went up to £36 million, which was below where we estimated it would be, and that's on the basis that some of the capital programme did slip, and it's also in relation to the fact that we did a voluntary revenue provision, which again was reported through to Finance and Resources Committee. And in relation to that voluntary revenue provision, what that means is we use basically some of the underspending year to set aside and repay some of our debt, so it's reduced that capital financing requirement. And it just, table 4 of the report shows that that's generated a saving basically in our capital charges going forward over the medium-term financial plan, which will help towards where we are with that gap going forward. Table 4 of the report highlights where we are with our actual borrowing. So our actual borrowing is just over £30 million. That's our external debt that we actually hold in relation to that overall borrowing position. And the difference between the two is what's termed your internal borrowing, which basically means on a temporary basis we're borrowing against the reserves and cash that we hold. So in terms of the borrowing activity during the year, we repaid a short-term loan of £3 million, but we didn't take out any new loans. So we've been able to manage that position through the internal borrowing, which is reflected again in the fact that we've got high levels of investment balances. So 2.31 identifies that we've got £13.4 million worth of investments at the end of the year, split between what is called your short-term borrowing, which is anything that's going to mature in more than 3 months, and what's called cash equivalents, which are things that are going to mature within the 3-month period at the end of the year. And the reason that balances are so high, and the reason we've been able to manage through internal borrowing, is because we did receive an additional top-up grant of £8 million in July to help towards paying out costs of McLeod and Matthew's pension remedy, and a lot of that outgoing has not actually happened yet. So that'll be something we're monitoring going forward in relation to the impact that has. In relation to investment rate and our achievement against that, that's set out in 2.36. So we achieved an average of 4.71% on our investments, and we measure that against what's called the SONIA rate, which was actually 5.09. So we were slightly under that, but we've been holding a lot of our money short-dated, whereas the SONIA rate is looking at a 90-day day rate. So that's why it's slightly lower than that. And we are looking at our options in terms of where we can place our money. Due to having high balances, that's one of the issues we'd encountered during the year. So we're now looking at using money market funds, which is something we can do under the strategy. 2.40 is the final section of the report, and that just identifies where we are in relation to the Treasury and prudential indicators that are set for the year. So there's nothing by exception to report. Obviously I've just mentioned where we are with the investment yield benchmark, that was slightly under the SONIA rate. And the only other thing was the ratio of financing costs. So because of the VRP element, if that did take us over that, where we thought we'd be for that and what the target was. But if you exclude the VRP element, it would have been under the 5% at 4.53. So I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Any questions? Andrew?
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the external borrowing, how insulated are we against movements in interest rates?
So our borrowing is fixed term. What we hold at the moment, it's majority of it is PWLB borrowing historically, and it is at fixed rates. So where we're exposed to, or potentially get exposed to interest rate exposure, is in relation to that internal borrowing and whether we have to externalise it at the right time to externalise it, which is what we monitor that, and why previously we've done short-term borrowing rather than long-term borrowing, because we were expecting the rates to come down a bit, so we don't want to tie in long-term. But at the moment we've not had to do any borrowing at all during 24-25.
Any other questions? For me, I think the report actually demonstrates sound financial stewardship, and despite the market conditions, our approach remains prudent. And Bev, I'm pleased to hear you say that you're actually looking at other ways to actually improve our returns, because I mean, we can actually think about doing that. And I know one thing that came up from this report last time is the opportunity of exploring more ethically local investments. So I'd encourage us to continue to do that. But with that, if members don't have any other questions, are they happy to approve the report?
Just a statement really, excuse me, just a statement really. I'd like to echo what the Chair said earlier. Sat on a few finance committees in these last few months, very impressed with the way the fire service run their audits and their balances and the checks, so well done. So I understand you're leaving us soon.
Yes, yeah, I am leaving in October, yeah. Thank you.
Good one.
Yeah, you want to spoil the meeting, Councillor Vernon?
No.
We're here for September.
Yeah. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to item 8, financial regulations. If I get that over to you, Beth.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is bringing through revised financial regulations for the Fire Authority. So the last time the financial regulations were updated was 2017, and it was picked up as part of an audit in April 2022 that the regulation should be reviewed. So that review is now taken place. So previously we had 3 documents that were the financial principles, financial procedures and financial regulations. So we've combined them now into one document to make it more user-friendly to refer to. We've also introduced a scheme of delegation table, which is Appendix 1 to the actual financial regulations. So that's drawn out some of the information that's in the body of the report, but put it into a table again to make it easier to reference to and to understand. And Appendix B to the report identifies where we're actually asking for changes in relation to those delegations. So that's really the key document to refer to in terms of where we're asking for changes in terms of financial delegations that are to either myself, the Chief Fire Officer or committees. So we are asking for, in terms of the changes, in relation to being able to do environments, we're asking for an increase in relation to the environments, in relation to non-pay, and in relation to pay that are set out in those tables, and that's mainly in view of the fact that they've not been reviewed for a long time. So if you think in terms of like where we are with spend and what you can achieve for those levels of where they were previously set, it doesn't give it doesn't cover many changes that are coming through, so then we're having to come back to committee to get approval for things, so it slows things down in terms of those being actioned. The purpose of financial regulations, it's my responsibility as the Treasurer and the sort of Section 151 officer to ensure that we have a continuous review of the financial regulations, and it's part of the Section 151 responsibility of the Local Government Act that we have established procedures in place for the proper administration of the financial affairs. So that's the reason for the financial regulations, and it is fire authorities in terms of reference that they agree the financial regulations. So in terms of what that document sets out, it sets out the financial accountabilities and management. So it sets out the responsibilities for the Fire Authority, Finance and Resources Committee, the Chief Fire Officer, the Clerk and Solicitor to the Authority, myself as the Head of Finance and Treasurer, the Strategic Leadership Team, Principal Officers, Area Managers and Budget Holders. It covers what the budgetary and policy framework is at financial planning. It covers risk management and control of resources. It then covers out the systems and procedures in place specifically around procurement, contracts, income and expenditure, banking and income, payments to employees and expenses, taxation, stock stores and inventories, gifts and hospitality. There's then a section on external arrangements that puts in relation to procedures where we're working with partners and we're accepting external funding. Like I say, Appendix 1 is then the financial scheme of delegation, and Appendix 2 is the procurement thresholds. So again, they were reviewed more recently. They were reviewed at July 2023 and approved by Fire Authority. The only update to it in terms of this report is that we've now added a section to the table, a column to the table that actually aligns it and says what the governance and approval route is. And Appendix 3's got a glossary of terms. So again, I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Any questions?
Thank you. It's not a question as such, it's more an observation. Anything to do with finance, especially in an authority like this, can be a bit of a head burner, can't it? Can really get a bit confusing for us all. So really I just wanted to compliment the authority and us on the presentation of the actual financial regulations document, because for both members new and old, but also any external people who at some point will be interested, this really is a very useful document to walk through, even for people who are not necessarily enthusiastic about reading spreadsheets and things. So really just, it's a good thing to have, and I'd suggest, I'm sure everyone will, but I suggest everyone keeps it on the shelf and read it as well.
No, thank you, Councillor Butler, and I'll echo that. Councillor much?
Yeah, I was just going to make the same point. Appendix 3, the 3-page glossary of financial terms. I mean, I've been a councillor for 12 years and, you know, I've been on various committees in the city, but that's a really, really useful summary of key financial documents and terms that you get as a councillor week in, week out. Why is this? Why is that? What's happening with this? And those 3 pages, you know, should be circulated to all councillors regardless of what authority they're on. You know, I know there's a lot of stuff in there that's directly to the fire authority, but there's a lot of generic stuff in there as well. So excellent.
Well done, Bev.
Thank you.
I mean, I would encourage all members, especially new members, to actually get familiar with this document. I mean, I don't know whether there's going to be any training actually as part of implementation of this, Bev, or Craig, you want to comment on?
Well, yes is the answer. I suppose just members, again, go back to like your CRMP and your strategies. What we're trying to do is make sure structurally we look very easy to read as much as spreadsheets, and I echo your considerations around spreadsheets, Councillor. So we're trying to make sure that the landscape that people see of this organisation is fairly easy to follow, and there's a structure layer by layer. You know, that's why we're sad at the prospect of losing Bev, because Bev's brought a lot of that, but the anticipation is through member development and staff development. There will be rollout for managers around financial training, and of course how that, you know, whatever we do at members seminar in the 5th of September, because I think we've circulated the dates to you already about the next members seminar on the 5th of September. So hopefully we can do some of that there as well, Chair. I don't know if Bev wants to add anything.
Yeah, I mean, that the same really, echoing what you just said in terms of, you know, the members' seminar going forward. We can pick out the highlights of the financial regulations that impact on Fire Authority and Finance and Resources Committee, and pull those out as part of that training.
Thank you. Then members are happy to approve the financial regulations at Appendix A and take into account the key changes set out on Appendix B to the scheme of delegation. Thank you. If we move to item 9, annual statement of assurance 24-25.
That is me.
Okay. Craig, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, background, we'll talk about where these came from, so almost like an annual report, if you're a sort of business, about how you've been doing as an organisation over the last year. They were brought in as part of the national framework document that sits within the primary legislation that we operate by. That framework document is under review. It's been under review by the previous administration government, and the current Minister over Fire has said that it's not likely to be this calendar year when the new framework document comes out, but it's likely to be very early into the next calendar year, hopefully. It'll be really welcomed by services as well, because it's a 2018 version, and the world's moved on quite rapidly since the framework. However, statement of assurance is attached as an appendix to this report. What we've tried to do as well is, because it was the final year of the last previous CRMP, we've tried to give a lot more look back over the period of the CRMP. So performance monitoring and reporting to community so they can see what their fire and rescue service has been doing with your money over a period of time. We still carry on with the 6 strategic goals: prevention, protection, response, people, continuous improvement and sustainability. So they've continued into this CRMP so we can benchmark over a longer period, and that's about that journey to outstanding, whatever that is, whenever that's kind of reached. For just the highlights really for members, 2.5 goes on to about numbers of fires, and you'll see things in there. We attend about 10,000-11,000 incidents a year. There's a slight upturn in that at the moment, but not in any kind of like significant way as it stands at the moment. What I would say about incidents, they're becoming slightly more complex and varied in their nature and where they tend to happen. So things like flooding becoming more prevalent, whether we have a lot of rain over the summer, whether we get sort of more wildfire exposure. And what we're also doing about those sorts of things is talked about within the Statement of Assurance. We talk about your appliance availability. We've got some of the strongest availability in the country. You'd expect that with whole time. No appliance is necessarily available all of the time because sometimes you have sickness, sometimes the vehicle breaks down and whatever. And I know some services have reported 100% availability, which must be really good because they can't have had any sickness or a vehicle's breaking down and however they measure it. And we'll learn from those organisations as well. But it's the on-call availability I'm even more proud of. These are people that isn't their primary employment necessarily. They work for other people. They might work for us as well as dual contract, but they are giving up more of their time back to their community. So I'm super proud of everybody around the on-call. Attendance times averaged, your measure is 8 minutes on average. Bearing in mind that varies, actuals vary depending on where you are, where the incident is. And we monitor that constantly through the service delivery performance update that comes to the Community Safety Committee. As we move down, it talks about all the kind of community engagement work we've been doing, the number of pupils in years 5 and 6 across the city and county, and the number of fire safety interventions with young people engaged in fire setting over the period of time. And it goes on further. Things like further down it talks about 99.7% pass rate of annual fitness tests for operational staff. They are required to achieve a standard of fitness throughout their whole career. That is a nationally set standard that we've adhered to. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to pass a fitness test, but we've chosen over the years that as operational officers, we will endeavour to do, as a leadership example, pass the fitness test. So I passed the same test as a firefighter has to pass in April. So these are examples of where the standards were being set. 2.6 talks about some of the achievements, organisational achievements. So we got Fire Service of the Year according to the Fire Magazine Excellence Awards last year. We were rated, as Bev has touched on in a previous report, 10 out of 11 areas as being good and 1 as adequate. And that was the first round where HMI changed the criteria. They'd added in the adequate rating. So they now made 5 bands of ratings. So to get good, they've narrowed the gap, which means you have to work a bit harder to get into good, is our understanding of it. We reintroduced the night shift back into Ashfield in terms of whole time back in, with no increase in firefighter staff, but that meant taking firefighters from other stations, reducing the establishment in other stations to put that back in Ashfield. And that was done really, I think really as a piece of change management. Really proud of how that was done, and the cooperation with trade unions to help us deal with that. You've funded us with 17 new appliances that have now arriving, and we're training on new appliances, and they'll be getting rolled out, and they're a clean cab design, so there won't be breathing apparatus sets in the cabs. So there's a way of working for firefighters that get those that'll have to change, and that's about protecting their longer term health. It's one of the many measures we've been taking over a number of years to work on that, and we still work on an action plan around contaminants. From my perspective, really good. We had a new command suite when we moved from the whole headquarters. We've now got a brand new command support vehicle for incidents. It makes the old one look a bit Heath Robinson now with the new state of technology, the scale of it, which means we're more prepared for those complex incidents in the future. We've rolled over in terms of new uniform for staff, and our last staff survey, we had 68% of the workforce complete it, and it showed a slight increase in improvement in all areas. there's still things like, you know, trust in management, and the more senior you become is how much trust does senior management get, and that'll be something we won't be complacent about. But we're really proud, and hopefully we can build on next year's staff survey and get above 70% of completion rate. But that will depend on the level of engagement of staff and our engagement to get staff engaged. We've got, obviously, we've continued to support White Ribbon. It's something I've been passionate about for quite a number of years. In terms of like violence against women and girls, we're very in terms of profile, in terms of our partners with that, and across our staff networks. And the staff networks generally are growing from strength to strength, and that's something about the conversation with the workforce, not just with trade unions, but with the workforce on where this organisation's going, and that's been something I've been really proud of in the last 3.5 years. We've continued to do things like a new fire cover review, so making sure that we assess the risk in communities around our strategic assessment of risk. And again, through 2.7, you can see the amount of things we're doing around fire protection, because fire protection in the built environment, what we are beginning to see is it's becoming more complex. There's more and more buildings being built, and that will be a future demand challenge for the authority about how you service that demand, whether that's more staff that's required in that area. But again, we'll make sure we keep members updated about that work. And again, something just at the end of pounds over the 3 years has been raised by staff in this organisation. And my thanks to all staff and everybody that's kind of supported that. So happy to take any questions over it.
A big thank you to our teams here. As your word said about our service, but it's not just that. If you look at just the issue, unbelievable assistance. We've had a mix of me phoning saying there was a car on fire and I thought there was somebody in it. They were there within less than 6 minutes. It was unbelievable. Involved with, they are professional every step of the way, and I'd like to please, when you see our teams across the county, please thank every single person.
Yeah, I just want to highlight on page 131 of the report, you know, drilling down in sort of bullet point 4. We think that when you look at that as a snapshot, what the fire authority, what the fire service in fact does, fire and rescue service, because it sort of distills at a glance the whole range of work. So I want to commend whoever, obviously the work's being done, but people who are trying to present it in a way that is accessible, because often people talk about numbers and people don't always switch on when they're told about big numbers. My only question is, you talk about new equipment. What happens to old equipment? Is old equipment just, you know, not used because it's broken, or is there some equipment and engines, etc., that are then given to other countries that might not be able to, you know, afford state-of-the-art stuff?
Yeah. I suppose on the kind of like what do, we have an asset disposal procedure policy, so we have the stuff that covers us to do this stuff. Depending on the cost or the decisions or where the thresholds of decisions are, some things might come back to authority. We might bring things back to you as authority just as a good news thing. So we have a long tradition of things like sending vehicles to Croatia and Eastern Europe, and much of our recent equipment has gone to Ukraine as part of national deployments from the Fire and Rescue Service, because there's a number of allegedly firefighters who have been taken prisoners over there, a number that have been killed and injured whilst responding to fires and incendiary devices. So there are fire appliances in Ukraine that go on a convoy from this country over to Ukraine. Something we're really proud of. It's not just, I'm not making a comment about the conflict, just what we're doing with the equipment. So, you know, I have comrades in the Fire and Rescue Service around the world, and we're able to do that. There are also business cases we've done in the past, so things like the Fire Museum at Mansfield, who've taken an appliance in the past, and we've had requests, and I think we've got a request coming soon, I think, from a local enterprise about using one of the appliances. So places that do big events like Wales Scout Camp and things as well, where they have to provide some kind of cover on site. So we do all those kind of things, Councillor, and if it's things where there's no economic value in things, so things like dry suits that we've used, we may well donate those. The issue we have with things with dry suits, they've got our badge on it, so you can hardly cut them off because they no longer become dry. So we try and do that to make sure there's end of life, really, and it goes on to somebody else.
Councillor Butler?
Yes, thank you. Can I just add to that, really? When you look at the less obvious things. Joe Public expects us to fight fires and go to car accidents and things, but when you look at everything else that's going on in the background, and we've discussed this quite a lot at the Community Safety Committee, but something that's really noticeable is the more than 15,000 safe and well interventions. I'm pretty sure that most people out there don't know we do this. And I know it ranges from relatively simple things like fitted smoke alarms right through to working with other agencies such as social services. And indeed, a week or two ago, I saw for myself on a visit, I went on a safe and well visit with one of the staff and team from Highfields into someone's home. And it really is, it's humbling, it's eye-opening, and it's if colleagues get an opportunity to do this, I would encourage you to do so. I learned a lot from the people I saw on the day. I've obviously learned a lot from these meetings as well. But somehow I don't think we, even now, don't shout enough about and get the message across quite as well as we could do with regards to what we do. One little question I've got. We do these school visits, or we engage with safety zone visits to year 5 and 6 pupils. How I may already been told this. If I've been told, forgive me. But how do we identify sort of where we're going, which schools we're going to? How do we pick them out? So just so we know it's appropriate to me.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, and thank you for your comments. I know the team really welcomed your visit the last week or so. In terms of the methodology around how we work that, so we have 2 processes. The safety zone is an open invite to all schools. Obviously not all schools can attend, but we now facilitate them across 4 different areas across city and county, so we have a really good uptake, hopefully looking at over 2,000 pupils able to attend that. So that is an invite that goes out to schools. In terms of direct engagement, we have just done some work with Nottinghamshire University, which is called a SEAC tool, and we're looking at in the fire service. But what that basically looks at is a number of risk factors that not only helps guide our community engagement, but it also highlights schools where we can prioritise that intervention. So it looks at a number of different demographic, sociological, financial factors. Also looks at the propensity of incidents as well, so we bring all of that information together. It goes through a spreadsheet, a very clever spreadsheet, far better than I understand, but it gives us an output which targets that intervention. So like all of our safe and well activity, like all of our fire protection activity, it's very much targeted at those schools. And then the final part of that is also we do some direct intervention sometimes. So if we have a particular issue in a local community, we not only engage with local councillors, local partners, but we also then engage with local schools as well regarding that. So we have a real three-pronged approach to making sure we engage and allocate our resources where they're going to have the biggest impact.
Thank you. I mean, we spent much of the morning looking at documents, governance and financial regulations that look at the internal governance of the authority, and this to my mind is probably just as important, if not more important, and I think it's one that we have a responsibility as members to shout about, but I was going to ask how we as a fire authority actually let the public know that provide private assurance. And on a personal note, I've been to visit a number of the fire stations, and when you actually listen to the feedback from the on-call firefighters who are actually very passionate, very committed, and actually, to my mind, to leave a day job and then come and do a night shift, I have to take my hat off to those individuals. I've attended staff networks, and then the staff are just as passionate and committed to the fire service, so we have a lot to be thankful for. At the weekend, sadly, I think I was seconds away from actually being caught in a road traffic accident, but actually coming back to Councillor Lee's point, the response rate of not just the fire service, the police and the ambulance service is phenomenal, and as you said, I think it's just to thank officers for that, and I'm hoping those individuals that were caught up in the accident are okay, but looking at it, they weren't severely affected. But for me, I think we need to find ways, all of us, of actually getting fire service on the front page, and obviously this document I've shared with our colleagues at the city, and I encourage you to do so the county, and actually we need to probably find ways of actually providing more assurance and shouting much louder than what we're doing at the moment. But I think it's a great document, a great piece of work. I think we just obviously need to thank all the staff that participate in the work with the Fire Authority. Any other?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. As the background talks about, this came in as part of the localism. You have to, I suppose, bear in mind the context of sort of like 2010 and the requirements of it, but basically about that local transparency across the organisation by who's the kind of lowest earner and 7 ratio between Chief Fire Officer, 0.3. So it'll offer to people like myself as Chief Fire Officer closer to that because of national pay rises and pay scales and XA. Hopefully members will find that to actually see. Was introduced in 27 and a median paid if people who are men in the organisation, the number of people who are women in the organisation, and the levels of roles they've got. So, and also the numbers of people we'd need to get in the organisation, so you're predominantly uniformed, able to do that. It's in there about national pay. If your grey book, operational, start myself, that's set by, and that's usually around 5. We changed the prevent financing. It was very clear about what we...
Questions? Councillor Vernon?
And on elected members to take a great...
their increments is dealt with in Authority U to find that money. And that's always been a difficult efficiencies or nationally through the same kind want to pay your Chief Fire Officer to kind of review that. Because that's been it might compress things and you might not want to do that. You might want, issue isn't the comparator to me, the reform for the sector. I'd welcome, so we're literally the closest we can get really is at the pay scale of it as an authority.
Funded and non-funded, they can agree what they want, but if they don't, when it comes to payment, obviously complicates things further. If you are agreeing with someone
on that, we obviously as a vehicle to get large
work, really, that's the most direct, the Chief Exec. Particularly in any kind of significant sense. So when it's health, education, the news outlets don't tend to like good news of learning. There is a national fire, so we're trying to see about how their journey's been on, and we'll that fire budgets will be ring fenced in the grant basically that the mayor gets. So there's an issue there about, okay, if that's not a priority, we just need to make sure we're concerned about that.
And that's where we as members have an opportunity. Sorry, did you want to come back, Councillor Vernon?
Yeah, I just want to thank him for that information and let him know that we are here. We are approachable. If there's anything we can do on that front, we've got some good committee positions there, and we've got a good voice at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor.
Hopefully use it wisely.
And I'd also encourage you, Councillor Vernon, to engage with MP Alex Norris, because obviously he's the Minister of Fire. I think if we're looking at political leverage, those individuals that we need to also be calling on. I've got some specific questions around. Clearly, picking on the points that have been raised around funding. When are we looking at benchmarking the senior pay positions, and then also when we think about the pressures on pay increase, inflation, how we actually going to be managing those as well.
I can probably answer the question in terms of the benchmarking. We do an exercise every 2 years, usually at the December meeting. I can't recall off the top of my head when the last one was, but I can give you that information after the meeting.
We've just done that one. I haven't spoken to Malcolm about this. Our former family group, the benchmark group, they've already been asked in terms of give us that information so that we're ready to let Malcolm have that. So we've reached out to those fire and rescue services to do that already. The second point of your question, Councillor,
it's what we put in place to manage those pay inflationary pressures, because I mean clearly there will be some.
It fits in with the review of the MTFS and the MTFP that will be coming forward. So obviously that comes to the Fire Authority in December, and we'll review those assumptions, so not just pay but all the assumptions around the budget really, and the inflation assumptions, and that obviously it tells us where we are in terms of the overall budget and the gap, along with the assumptions that we've got about the funding position. But obviously that won't be confirmed then until we get the provisional settlement in late December and the final settlement then in February. But that's the process for that.
Thank you, and I think it's just, again, we just need to continue to shout loudly for the fire service, because as we said, we're not necessarily protected. We do a marvellous job, but we seem to be the bottom of the league table, so we need to do something about that, or do what we can to influence that. And with that, are members happy to approve this statement of pay policy as attached to Appendix A?
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, move to item 11, changes in establishment and annual reports.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm just going to open the hard copy because the online copy is playing up on me.
Do you want this page?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, apologies, members, on that, just that delay while it opens. If I go back sort of 3 years for members that weren't on the authority, when I became Chief Fire Officer, we made some changes to the scheme of delegations for the Chief Fire Officer, and that was born about by some of the learning around how we manage the establishment. So your expectation of me to basically earn my corn and manage the establishment alongside the budget. One of the things we'd found over a period of time where if we wanted to make a change in the establishment, a business case had to come to the strategic leadership team, that then had to be sent to the HR committee, that then had to come for full approval at Fire Authority before we could then go out to recruitment. That was taken about, I don't know, anywhere from sort of 6 months, 4 months to 6 months. Sometimes if that was a fixed term contract, say for 12 months, we're 6 months into the contract before then getting the person appointed, and you're talking sometimes where you generate new posts that aren't on the establishment. So if you're saying, looking at the pay policy earlier about the £24,000 roll lowest paid, well actually that just didn't seem to make sense. But we wanted some way, in consultation with the chair, of making sure that we could speed that up, become far more effective as an organisation, make decisions, but also give you the assurance as members that we weren't just going rogue and appointing what we want wherever we want. So we agreed that we'd bring back an annual report. That's previously been September. We've wanted to align this with some internal things as well, hence it's here in July. It makes more sense internally for us. What this report does on this occasion then is on that backwards look about all the changes we've made in the establishment along the way. And the bottom of the report in the tables will talk about what we've actually done. Now there seems like a lot, but this goes back to the restructure we did in our prevention community engagement team. It was predominantly, some roles had changed over the years, we called them different things, but alongside how we work with partners, we were finding actually that it was time to give it a good coat of looking at in there. And that work's still bedding in, people are still getting used to it, but actually what we're beginning to see, those early signs, we've got some teething issues about, well, we missed this little bit of detail, we're having to work through that piece of work. But the reality is we're starting to get better quality referrals, safe and wells. We were actually able to put more capacity into the community engagement team, but save money as well, because of the types of functions and skills that we were using. So we've detailed in terms of the table at 2.3 about what was deleted, how much it saved, contribute to savings, and then the new post is basically what all those people that stayed in those roles that are now called and now doing. So we've actually showed what we've deleted and what we've created on the establishment for members to be able to clearly see. And then we've talked about regraded posts, so communication officers. So where we've done that, we've done that hopefully in underspending other areas where we haven't got posts, or the savings we've made in the previous table above. And of course there's an internal process through job evaluation where managers want to create a post, getting the business approval and then getting that job evaluated to the right grade to be able to pay that person the right money for the skills they bring to the organisation. And I guess really, Chair, that's as much as I want to say on that one.
Any questions from members? No? Are we happy to approve the report?
Yeah.
Thank you. Move to item 12, resourcing to risk update.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. So this paper, I'll take you through the resourcing to risk update. For clarity, this is around the reinstatement of whole-time Duke system at Ashfield Fire Station. The resourcing to risk work also took a broader element around allocating some resources into other areas, but the specific request for this paper last year was to look at the reinstatement of Ashfield. So just for a little bit of context, back in 2021, Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service carried out one of our independent fire cover reviews. So this is what we periodically undertake to make sure that our resources are allocated to the risk that we face within our communities. And that highlighted that the reinstatement of Ashfield Fire Station, which had previously been changed to a day crewing station, would help us to meet our targets within the CRMP. So moving forward to 2023, members instructed the Chief Fire Officer to initiate the work around that, and by the 29th of November 2023, Ashfield Fire Station returned to a 24-hour crewing model, which it has remained at during that time. An update report and evaluation report was reported to Community Safety Committee, and at that Community Safety Committee it was requested that we report back when we had a full year's worth of evaluation to the full authority. So here we are. To understand the basis of this report, what we did is we took the full 12 months worth of data from before the change to full-time crewing, and we have now compared that to a full 12 months data after the change, so we've got that comparative nature. But just for context, to set out how busy we were, in the year before, we attended slightly more incidents, so we're slightly busier due to the nature of incidents in that year. So it's not a like-for-like comparison, but hopefully it will give you some comparison to draw assurance from. It's also worth noting in 2.2 it highlights that we undertook these changes, like the Chief Officer mentioned earlier in terms of our annual statement of assurance, we undertook these changes without any additional crewing. So what that meant was that we reduced the number of firefighters at every other station slightly, and we moved 30 people back into the Ashfield crewing model. Now, what is worthy of note, I think, is that those changes took a lot of engagement with representative bodies, but also with the staff themselves. And we managed to undertake all of those moves, both on time, but also without any grievances being raised by any of those people who were involved in those moves. So I think that's credit both to the relationship with the trade unions, but also the professionalism and the approach of our staff, who saw that this was the right thing to do, and to some personal detriment to a number of people, they moved to make sure that our crewing model addressed the risks that we saw within the community. So reinstating the 24-hour crewing model was anticipated to improve our attendance time to incidents within particularly the Ashfield area, and our modelling had highlighted that it should deliver about 48-second improvement. Now when we start talking about seconds, it's very marginal, but when we look at the impact that can have on incidents, it's something that we are very specific about. What we have actually found and highlighted in 2.5 is that the improvement over that first year has actually seen an improvement of 58 seconds, so 10 seconds greater than even that was anticipated. So that has improved. And also then that has not been at the detriment of response standards across the rest of the county, which continue to be underneath our target of 8 minutes on average from time to mobilisation. So a really positive reintroduction there in terms of the response times. However, what I would say is that the increase in our wider productivity has been really where we've seen significant improvement. So in 2.8 it highlights that we introduced 2 new whole-time watches. That has almost seen a 98% or almost 100% increase in our productivity at that station, particularly in terms of safe and well visits, and the improvements we've had in terms of engaging with our communities. Business safety checks, so where our crews go out and inspect those medium and lower risk premises that our fire safety inspectors don't have the capacity to visit, has seen a 250% increase. So again, a huge credit to the professionalism and application of the teams at Ashfield Fire Station. A further benefit has also seen the number of community groups that we can engage with, and we're really proud now we coupled the return to a whole-time career model with a significant investment in Ashfield Fire Station, a restructure of the facilities there, and we're really proud to host a number of community groups now in our room there at the station, and really being part of the local community. One of the potential negatives around increasing our whole-time establishment at Ashfield is that the on-call section who are based there will see a reduction in the number of incidents that they attend. Before, overnight, when it was just on-call available, obviously they picked up all of the initial attendances to incidents, and it was seen as a foreseen issue that this may have an impact on retention. We are pleased to say, though, that in the monitoring period for this report, only 2 people left on call at Ashfield, and the exit interview for both of those people highlighted it was unrelated to the changes that have occurred. In fact, Ashfield on-call section continued to maintain an average availability of 91.96 and 92% availability, which is well above our target of 85% and above the average availability across the rest of the organisation. And like the Chair mentioned earlier, balancing that with a primary employment in most cases is a fantastic achievement. And again, our huge thanks to the on-call staff who continue to provide that excellent service to the community of Ashfield. It's also encouraging that we've continued to see recruitment at Ashfield, people still wanting to join that team and be part of our organisation in terms of our on-call firefighting. Final point to touch on is in 2.13, where our staff survey, when we look at the specific feedback for crews at Ashfield Station, we've seen an increase in that area. As the Chief highlighted, we've had increases in every area, but specifically at Ashfield, we've had an increase in the number of people who see themselves still being with Nottinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service in the next 12 months. So it really shows that despite these changes, there's a positive outturn in terms of engagement. So a really positive news story really in terms of both how this change was achieved, but also the outputs and outcomes that we're seeing within the local community and across the wider service. And the recommendation to members in 2.14 is that we will continue to monitor these areas. We have a service delivery evaluation group, which the area manager in my team chairs. That performance is reported through to the Community Risk Management Board, which the Chief Fire Officer chairs, and we will continue to report that through to the Community Safety Committee. However, we would recommend and ask that members are happy to discharge this from Fire Authority scrutiny now. We see it very much as business as usual, and we'll continue to monitor it as part of our wider performance in service delivery. So thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions from members that may have.
Any questions from members? Councillor Cox.
Just 2 observations, really, if I could. How many 24-hour stations do we have in the county? 24-hour crewed stations in the county?
So across the county, we have gone absolutely blank, even though it's my absolute bread and butter of work. So we have 16 whole-time crewed stations where we have a permanently 24-hour crewed station, and then some of those also have on-call with them, like Ashfield Worksop stations, and we have a number of standalone on-call sections as well.
Okay, and so just leading on from that then, the metrics on this report are all based around the Ashfield.
Yeah.
Are we? Can I assume then that the metrics are the same for all the rest of the 24-hour, with increases in the time, activities and so on, and response times, etc.?
Yeah, so we report through to the Community Safety Committee in terms of all of the outputs for all the stations on a regular basis. This particularly here at Ashfield has seen that increase in that decrease in attendance time, so the increase in performance in that particular area because of the reintroduction of those crews. We have a more consistent metric across our whole-time stations, and we delve into the sort of specifics around the Community Safety Committee on a quarterly basis, where we provide an overview. So the main body of that committee is a service delivery performance report, and that's where we propose that this data in future will continue to be reported there.
Okay, just finally, and again, this purely out of interest, is when we say that we've knocked 58 seconds off the response times, how are the response times timed? How do you time? So when the client leaves the station, how is that timed?
Yeah, so we measure that here through from the point of mobilisation. So we also measure, so as soon as 999 call's made, we measure the amount of time that it takes to be answered by control. We then measure the call handling time of the control operator, and the response time is measured from the time it's mobilised, so they press the button in control to send Ashfield to an incident, to the point that we book in attendance at the incident. So that's the time. So that incorporates for whole time, that incorporates the crew stopping whatever they're doing. So that may be training, it may be eating, it may be being out doing a safe and well visit, stopping that, getting on the appliance, and then travelling to wherever that incident is. So there's a large number of variables in there, but we try and manage that and maintain it. And when we talk about seconds, it's because shaving seconds off that time really is where we work and continue to focus our efforts.
Every second. Exactly. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just following on that from Councillor Cox and also the New Authority, this was something we specifically asked for in Community Safety Committee, and we do actually look at all these stats and on-call. I mean, I think it has to be celebrated because this has been a huge success, and actually the statistics here are actually a lot better than some other stations, and we're wondering how we'd actually transition it. But both in terms of the attendance times on call in particular, it looks really good, and the staffing, so it's a huge success story. So I think now, obviously, we can just incorporate it into the usual reports we do on the committee. But just to thank you and everybody else for their work, because it's actually exceeded our expectations. When we actually decided to do this, we didn't think the stats were actually going to be this good. So I think people in Ashfield will be absolutely delighted looking at that and the service they're getting. So thank you very much.
I think it's to echo that, and I think it shows the commitment of the Fire Authority to put in resources where they're most in need, and actually thinking about, we need to be able to adapt our model to community risk, and this is just evidence of that, and the report just shows that it was the right decision to do at the time. So with that, unless members have got any other questions, are we happy to approve the 3 recommendations in the report?
Yep.
Agreed. And then we move on to committee outcomes.
These are just for noting.
Okay, they're just for noting. And then with that, if we could exclude the public, resolve to exclude the public from the meeting, consideration of remaining items in accordance with section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972 under Schedule 12A Part 1 Paragraph 3 on the basis that having regard to all of the circumstances, the public interest in maintaining an exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information.